It was another quiet day at the Terran Fleet Command, a place where routine scans and reports filled the air. The galaxy was vast, and peace had reigned for some time. The Terran Empire had established itself as a powerful force, its military respected across countless star systems. But all that was about to change. Deep in the heart of space, far from the known borders of human territory, a strange signal was detected. It wasn't like any communication the fleet had encountered before. The signal didn't match any known language, nor did it seem to come from any civilization they had cataloged. Its frequency was unusual, its structure complex, almost like a puzzle that didn't belong. Lieutenant Commander Grace Patel was the first to spot the anomaly on her monitoring station. At first, she thought it was a mistake, maybe a glitch in the system. But when she checked the coordinates, she realized something strange. The signal was coming from a distant star system, a place far outside the normal routes of Terran space. This wasn't just some random signal, it was coming from somewhere unknown. Patil immediately alerted her superior officer, Captain Darren Fisher. Fisher was a seasoned veteran of the fleet, known for his calm demeanor and sharp instincts. He had been through dozens of missions, but this was different. He could sense it. This was not just some random anomaly. It was a message. As the signal was analyzed, the command center buzzed with activity. A team of codebreakers worked relentlessly to decode the transmission. What they found shocked them. The message was clear now, and its contents sent a ripple through the room. "We need the Deathworlders. The Sulfar are coming. Help us, or we will all fall." The words were simple but powerful. The message was desperate, coming from a civilization that clearly knew of humanity's reputation. The term Deathworlders was used to describe humans, and it was well known across the galaxy. Humanity had earned this title through their brutal survival on Earth, a planet known for its harsh environments, dangerous wildlife, and constant struggle for survival. No one else had survived the way humans had. And now, it seemed, someone needed them. The alien race who sent the message wasn't named, but the warning was enough. The fleet command quickly realized that the Sulfar, an ancient, fearsome empire known for their cruelty and unyielding nature, had begun a conquest of the stars. And it was clear now that this empire, which had crushed so many civilizations before, was now turning its attention to this unknown species. Fisher quickly called for a meeting with the highest-ranking officials at the Fleet Command. As the officers gathered, the question that everyone asked was the same. Should they respond? The Terran Empire had many enemies, and it wasn't clear whether this message was a trap or a legitimate cry for help. But one thing was certain. The name Deathworlder was a call to arms, and humanity had never turned down a fight it could win. The decision was made swiftly. A fleet would be prepared, and Commander Erica Valdez, a seasoned warrior known for her leadership and unflinching courage, was selected to lead the mission. She was no stranger to battle, and she would not hesitate to respond to the call for help. The galaxy was about to witness the full force of humanity's wrath. The decision was made. The Terran Empire would answer the call, no matter the risks. Humanity's reputation as the Deathworlders, survivors of the deadliest planet in the galaxy, had reached every corner of space. But this was different. This time, the Terran fleet would be going into unknown territory, to a place they had never been before, to fight against an enemy they had never faced. Commander Erica Valdez stood at the front of the briefing room, her hands folded behind her back as she watched the holographic map of the galaxy. The room was silent, all eyes on her. The Terran Empire had sent some of its best soldiers, the fiercest warriors, to protect the galaxy from threats. And now, those soldiers were needed once again. The message from the alien race had been clear. The Sulfar Empire was coming, and they had already begun their conquest of the stars. They were ruthless, taking over worlds without mercy, and the civilizations in their path had no way of fighting back. The Veltrae, the species that had sent the distress signal, were just one of many races now under the Sulfar's boot. They needed help, and they needed it fast. Valdez had fought in many battles before, but she knew this mission would be unlike anything she had faced. Her fleet, the Deathworlder fleet, was made up of humanity's best warriors, soldiers who had survived the harshest conditions on Earth. They had trained for this. They had trained for war. And now, they would show the galaxy what humanity could do. The fleet was quickly assembled, with ships and soldiers ready to depart. The Deathworlder fleet wasn't just a symbol of strength, it was a force of nature. Armed with the most advanced technology humanity had ever created, these ships were fast, deadly, and efficient. But it wasn't just the technology that made them so dangerous. It was the people. The soldiers who served in the fleet had faced impossible odds on their homeworld, and now they would face them again in space. As Valdez stood in front of her fleet, she knew the weight of the mission. There would be no turning back. The Scifi were powerful, and they had been conquering the galaxy for centuries. The odds were against them. But if there was one thing humanity was known for, it was never backing down. They had survived when no one thought they could. They had fought when everyone else had given up. And now, they were going to fight again. "Prepare yourselves," Valdez said, her voice calm but firm. "We are not just fighting for the Veltrae. We are fighting for every species the Scifi have crushed. We are fighting for the freedom of the galaxy. And we will win." Her words rang out in the room, and the soldiers, with their eyes burning with determination, nodded in agreement. They were ready. Humanity had been called upon to fight a war that was not their own, but they would answer that call with everything they had. The fleet set course for the star system where the Veltrae lived. As the ships moved through the stars, the soldiers prepared for the battle ahead. They knew the dangers. They knew the risks. But they also knew that no one could match the power of the Deathworlders. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face humanity at its full strength. The Deathworlder fleet cut through the endless stretches of space, its ships gliding through the void like dark shadows, heading for the unknown. Commander Erica Valdez stood on the bridge of the flagship, the ironclad, watching the stars zoom past as the fleet accelerated toward the distant star system. There was no turning back now. The call had been made, and humanity was already on its way to answer. For most of the crew, this mission was unlike any they had been on before. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless star systems and alien species. But this mission wasn't about exploration or diplomacy. It was about war. The Deathworlder fleet had one purpose: to fight, to protect, and to destroy the enemies of those who couldn't defend themselves. As the fleet moved further into unknown space, the crew felt the weight of the journey settle in. They were heading toward a place no Terran had been before, a place where danger lurked in every shadow. The Scifi Empire was vast and cruel, a force that had already crushed countless civilizations. It would take all of humanity's strength and skill to defeat them. Valdez knew the soldiers on her ships were ready for battle. The Deathworlders had been trained on Earth's harshest worlds, where survival was a constant fight. They had faced the wild animals of their home planet, survived the extreme weather, and fought wars against each other. Earth had prepared them for this moment in ways no other species could understand. Now they would face a different kind of battle, one in the cold, unforgiving emptiness of space. The fleet wasn't alone in its journey. As they traveled, they encountered several alien species, some curious, some hostile. A few tried to approach the fleet, unsure of who or what the Terrans were. The Deathworlders, however, weren't interested in making friends. Their mission was clear: to find the Scifi, defeat them, and free the Veltrae and others who had been oppressed. There was no time for distractions. The first alien species they encountered were the Rethkari, a race of bird-like creatures who, at first, were wary of the human fleet. They had heard the stories of humanity's ferocity and feared the Deathworlders. But when they saw the fleet's power and the determination in the eyes of the soldiers, the Rethkari decided to keep their distance. The Terrans didn't need allies. They needed enemies to defeat. And in the cold vacuum of space, Enemies were easy to find. As the fleet continued its journey, the stars stretched farther apart, and the silence of deep space wrapped around them. The officers on the ironclad were silent, each one lost in their thoughts. This mission was bigger than anything they had done before. This wasn't just a fight for a planet or a colony. It was a fight for the very future of the galaxy. Commander Valdez watched the stars through the viewport, her mind focused on the mission ahead. She had led troops through battle after battle on Earth, but this war would be unlike any she had ever fought. The Xolfar would not be easy to defeat, but she knew one thing. Humanity had never lost a war it had fought with everything it had. The journey was long, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on everyone. But one thing was clear. When the Deathworlders arrived, the Xolfar would learn what it truly meant to face humanity. After days of travel through the cold, empty space, the Deathworlder fleet finally arrived at the star system where the Veltri lived. The system was surrounded by dust clouds, asteroids, and dying stars, a place where no large fleet would usually venture. It was clear that the Veltri had chosen to hide here, hoping to escape the ever-expanding reach of the Xolfar Empire. Commander Erica Valdez stood on the bridge of the ironclad, staring at the holographic map of the system. There were no signs of Xolfar ships, but that didn't mean they weren't out there. The Xolfar were known for their brutal tactics, and Valdez wasn't foolish enough to think they would let anyone invade their territory without a fight. "Commander, we are approaching the Veltri homeworld," said Lieutenant Patel, her voice calm but filled with tension. No signs of hostile activity so far. Valdez nodded, her eyes narrowing. The Veltri had called for help, but they were a peaceful species, not known for their ability to fight. The Deathworlders were their last hope, and the humans would not let them down. As they entered the Veltri's home system, the first signs of alien life appeared. The Veltri had sent a small fleet of ships to meet the Terran fleet. These ships were small, smooth, and graceful in design, clearly not built for war, but rather for peaceful travel. The Veltri themselves were even more unusual. Tall, slender beings with pale skin and large, expressive eyes. They looked almost human, but their features were softer, gentler, and their movements were graceful, like that of a dancer. The Veltri ships came close to the ironclad, and a transmission was sent from the lid ship. A moment later, the image of a Veltri commander appeared on the screen. He bowed slightly, a sign of respect. "Welcome, Terrans," the Veltri commander said in a soft, melodic voice. "I am Commander Thalos. We have been waiting for you." Valdez studied the alien carefully, trying to gauge whether this was truly a peaceful encounter or the beginning of a trap. She had been in situations like this before, where things weren't always what they seemed, but the Veltri seemed genuinely relieved to see them. "We received your message," Valdez replied, her tone firm. "We're here to help you fight the Xolfar. Tell me what we're up against." Thalos' expression grew somber. "The Xolfar are unlike anything you have ever faced. They are ruthless, merciless, and they have already taken countless worlds. We've lost everything. Our cities, our families. They showed no mercy. We need your strength to survive." Valdez's mind raced. The Xolfar were even worse than she had imagined. The Veltri were a peaceful race, unable to fight back against such an enemy. It was no wonder they had turned to the Deathworlders. Humanity was their last hope. "Tell me where to strike," Valdez said. "We'll take the fight to them." Commander Thalos nodded, relieved. He gestured to a map that appeared on the screen. "The Xolfar are holding our homeworld. We must act quickly before they wipe us out completely." Valdez glanced at her officers. The time for diplomacy was over. It was time for war. "Prepare for battle," she ordered. "We're going to take back your world." The fleet moved into position, ready to launch its first strike against the Xolfar. The first step had been made. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to face the Deathworlders. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived at the Veltri homeworld. The time for talk was over. Commander Erica Valdez stood on the bridge of the ironclad, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the enemy's position. The Xolthar Empire was holding the Veltrae's planet in a grip of iron. Valdez knew the Xolthar would not give up easily, but humanity was not known for backing down. "We're ready, Commander," said Lieutenant Pottle. "All ships are in position. We've got the green light for the first strike." Valdez nodded, her face hardening. The Deathworlder fleet was prepared for battle. The fleet had a long history of fighting on Earth's harsh, deadly terrain, but space combat was something else. It required strategy, precision, and above all, a willingness to endure. Fortunately, the Deathworlders had all of that. "Start the assault," Valdez commanded. The first wave of ships moved forward. The ironclad led the charge, its massive guns primed and ready. The smaller, faster vessels of the fleet followed closely behind. They flew in perfect formation, a well-oiled machine ready to strike. The Xolthar had no idea what was coming. As they approached the planet, the first signs of Xolthar defenses appeared. The skies above the Veltrae homeworld were filled with large, menacing warships, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. The Xolthar were ready for a fight, but they had underestimated the Deathworlders. The Terran ships opened fire. A barrage of energy blasts streaked across the sky, hitting the Xolthar ships with terrifying force. The explosions rocked the enemy fleet, sending debris flying in all directions. But the Xolthar were not easy to defeat. They retaliated with their own weapons, sending powerful beams of energy toward the attacking fleet. The ironclad took several hits, but its shields held strong, absorbing the brunt of the blasts. "Keep pushing forward," Valdez ordered, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Don't let up." The Deathworlder fleet advanced, taking out enemy ships one by one. Every strike was precise, every maneuver calculated. The Xolthar fought back with everything they had, but the humans were relentless. The Terran soldiers aboard the ships had faced danger on Earth in ways the Xolthar could not imagine. This was what they were trained for, surviving the impossible, fighting the unbeatable. On the surface of the Veltrae homeworld, ground forces prepared for the next phase of the attack. The Veltrae had never seen anything like the Deathworlders. Their soldiers, equipped with advanced armor and weapons, dropped onto the planet in sleek landing crafts. As they touched down, they quickly moved to secure key locations, their weapons blazing as they engaged the enemy in brutal close combat. The Xolthar were surprised by the speed and ferocity of the human assault. Commander Tholos, the Veltrae leader, watched in awe as the humans fought with unmatched skill. "They are like a storm," he whispered. "We never stood a chance without them." The Deathworlders showed no mercy. Wherever the Xolthar tried to hold their ground, the humans cut through them like a blade through soft flesh. The tide was turning, and the Veltrae could feel it. The Xolthar might have had an empire, but the Deathworlders had something far more dangerous: the will to fight and the strength to win. By the end of the day, the Veltrae's capital was under Terran control. The first battle had been won, but this war was far from over. The Xolthar would not give up easily, but the Deathworlders would not rest until they were defeated. The galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of humanity's rise as a force that would never back down. The first victory had come easily, but Commander Erica Valdez knew the war was far from over. The Deathworlder fleet had dealt a heavy blow to the Xolthar, but their enemy was not one to surrender quickly. The Xolthar were vicious, and now they were angry. The real fight had just begun. Valdez stood on the bridge of the ironclad, staring out at the stars. The planet below, once under the control of the Xolthar, was now in the hands of the Veltrae, thanks to humanity's swift strike. The Terran fleet had won the battle, but there was no time to celebrate. The Xolthar would regroup, and when they did, they would strike back with everything they had. "Commander, we've detected a large fleet approaching from the outer rim," said Lieutenant Patel, her voice sharp with concern. "It's the Xolthar." They're coming for us. Valdez's eyes narrowed. She had expected this. The Xolthar wouldn't take their defeat lying down. They would want revenge, and they would throw everything at the Deathworlders. Prepare the fleet for a defensive position, Valdez ordered. We'll meet them head-on. The fleet quickly moved into formation, the ships bristling with weapons and ready for the coming fight. The ironclad led the charge again, its massive hull glowing with energy as it powered up its weapons systems. The smaller ships of the fleet scattered around it, forming a tight defensive perimeter. As the Xolthar fleet came into view, Valdez could see the massive warships that made up their fleet. The Xolthar had clearly brought their best to this battle. The ships were heavily armored and bristling with weapons, their dark hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The first exchange of fire was brutal. Energy beams streaked across the space between the two fleets, colliding with shields and causing explosions in the vacuum of space. The Xolthar ships were tough, but the Deathworlder fleet was faster, more agile, and more organized. The ironclad fired its main cannon, sending a massive energy blast toward the lead Xolthar ship. The explosion rocked the enemy vessel, sending it spinning out of control before it exploded in a flash of light. "Keep pushing forward," Valdez shouted. "Take out their flagships. Once we break their command, the rest will crumble." The Deathworlder fleet pushed forward, picking off Xolthar ships one by one. But the Xolthar weren't going down without a fight. They launched a new tactic. Small fighter ships darted out from the larger vessels, swarming around the Terran ships like angry wasps. The Deathworlders responded in kind, launching their own fighters and engaging in high-speed dogfights among the stars. The battle raged on for hours, both fleets taking heavy losses. The Deathworlder ships were tougher than the Xolthar had expected, and their precision in combat was unmatched. But the Xolthar were relentless, throwing everything they had at the humans. Valdez watched the battle unfold, her mind focused on the tactics. The Xolthar were strong, but they lacked the one thing humanity had in abundance: the will to fight and survive at all costs. The Deathworlders had fought for their lives on Earth. They knew how to push forward when every instinct screamed to retreat. The tide began to turn as the ironclad destroyed another of the Xolthar flagships, and the remaining enemy ships started to retreat. The battle was far from over, but the Deathworlders had shown their strength. The Xolthar were beginning to realize they were not fighting a war they could easily win. "Keep up the pressure," Valdez ordered. "We can't let them escape. If they regroup, this will drag on forever." With the Xolthar retreating, the Deathworlder fleet pursued them, unwilling to give them a chance to regroup. The victory was in sight, but Valdez knew this was only the beginning. The Xolthar would be back, but next time they would be even more determined, and the Deathworlders would be waiting for them. The Xolthar had retreated, but Commander Erica Valdez knew it was only temporary. The enemy was regrouping, and it wouldn't take long for them to come back stronger. The Deathworlder fleet had won a significant victory, but the war was far from over. Valdez and her fleet would need to stay sharp. The ironclad moved slowly through the silence of space, its crew on high alert. The battle had left its mark on both sides, and the Deathworlders had lost ships as well. But they had gained something important: confidence. The Xolthar had learned that humanity was not a force to be taken lightly. "Commander, we've detected a large energy surge near the edge of the system," said Lieutenant Patel, her voice steady. "It's the Xolthar. They're preparing for something big." Valdez's eyes narrowed. She had expected the enemy to lick their wounds and try again. But this time, the Xolthar were not just coming for revenge. They were coming for the end of the war. Valdez knew it was their last chance to destroy the Deathworlder fleet. "They're desperate," Valdez said quietly. "This will be their final push." The ironclad and the rest of the fleet quickly moved into position. The smaller Terran ships took the lead, flying out ahead of the main fleet to scout the enemy's location. Every officer on the ironclad knew this would be a fight to the death. There would be no retreat this time. The Xolthar fleet emerged from behind a nearby asteroid belt, a massive wall of warships charging toward the Terran forces. The ships were bigger, better armed, and better organized than before. It was clear that Solfar had pulled out all the stops for this battle. Engage at maximum range, Valdez ordered. We can't let them close in. The Terran fleet opened fire first, launching a barrage of energy blasts that slammed into the Solfar ships. But the Solfar weren't caught off guard. They fired back with everything they had, sending beams of deadly energy toward the Terran ships. The space between the two fleets was filled with explosions, fire, and the debris of broken ships. It was a brutal fight, one that would leave both sides battered. The ironclad took several hits, but its powerful shields absorbed the damage. Valdez and her crew were used to the chaos of battle, and they fought with everything they had. The smaller Terran ships darted in and out of the Solfar's line of fire, launching missiles and energy blasts that tore through the enemy fleet. But the Solfar weren't giving up. They had launched their own fighter ships, and the space around the battle was filled with the sounds of combat. The Terran pilots fought hard, engaging the Solfar fighters in a deadly dogfight. Valdez watched the battle unfold on the screen, her mind working quickly. The Solfar were strong, but they were not invincible. The Deathworlder fleet had one advantage the Solfar could never match: the will to survive. The Terran soldiers fought not just for victory, but for the future of every species the Solfar had threatened. Concentrate fire on their flagship, Valdez ordered. Take it down, and the rest will scatter. The fleet responded, directing all firepower toward the Solfar flagship. The massive ship took hit after hit, its shield starting to fail. Then, with a final powerful blast from the ironclad's main cannon, the flagship exploded in a burst of light. The Solfar fleet faltered. Their command structure had been broken, and the remaining ships began to retreat. The Deathworlder fleet pursued them, determined to finish what they had started. The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. Valdez watched as the last of the Solfar ships fled into the darkness. The galaxy would soon be rid of their tyranny. Humanity had proven itself once again. The Deathworlders were not a force to be underestimated. They had come to protect the weak, and they had done so with power, strength, and determination. But Valdez knew the war was not over. The Solfar had been beaten back, but they were still out there, and the Deathworlders would be ready for them. The galaxy was still, the echo of the battle slowly fading. The Deathworlder fleet had crushed the Solfar in their final stand, but it had come at a great cost. The ironclad and the other ships had taken heavy damage, and many soldiers had been lost. Commander Erica Valdez stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the wreckage of the enemy fleet. The Solfar had been defeated, but the weight of the victory was heavy on her shoulders. "Commander, the fleet is reporting all clear," said Lieutenant Patel, her voice soft but tired. "We've won, but it's been a long, costly fight." Valdez nodded, her mind already turning to the next steps. The Deathworlders had brought victory to the Veltri, but they had also made enemies. The Solfar were gone, but they weren't the only threat in the galaxy. There were others waiting, watching, and ready to challenge humanity's strength. "We did what we had to do," Valdez said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion that weighed on her. "But this isn't over. The galaxy has been reminded of what humanity is capable of, and the Solfar won't be the last to test us." As the ironclad began the journey back to the Veltri homeworld, Valdez's thoughts turned to the soldiers who had fought beside her. The death toll had been high, and the survivors had paid a price. The Deathworlders had fought for the Veltri, but they had also fought for themselves, fighting to prove that humanity could stand strong in the face of any threat. The Veltri, once oppressed and near extinction, now found themselves free. They were grateful for the humans' intervention, but Valdez knew the Veltri would never truly understand the cost of their freedom. The Deathworlders had fought and died for them, and that was something the Veltri could never repay. The fleet landed on the Veltri homeworld, the planet now under the protection of humanity. Valdez stepped onto the surface, the air crisp and unfamiliar. The Veltray greeted her and her crew with gratitude, their leaders bowing in respect. But Valdez couldn't help but feel the emptiness of it all. The battle had been won, but the scars of war would last a lifetime. "Commander Valdez," said Commander Tholos, his voice soft but filled with respect, "we owe you and your people everything. Without you, we would be gone." Valdez nodded but didn't speak. She didn't need thanks. She didn't need to hear how much the Veltray appreciated them. She had done her job, and her soldiers had done theirs. That was enough. As the Veltray celebrated their newfound freedom, Valdez turned back to the fleet. The Deathworlders had won this war, but war had a way of taking everything, leaving only the pain of loss behind. The mission had been a success. The Xolthar had been defeated, but Valdez knew that the galaxy was far from safe. Other enemies would rise, and the Deathworlders would be there to face them. Humanity's place in the galaxy was now secure, but at what cost? The price of victory had been high, and it was a price that no one, not even the Deathworlders, could forget. The battle was over. The Xolthar Empire had been shattered, their ships scattered in the cold vastness of space. The Deathworlder fleet had claimed victory, but the cost had been high. Commander Erica Valdez stood on the bridge of the Ironclad, staring out at the stars. The war was won, but the aftermath still loomed over her like a heavy fog. The Veltray homeworld was safe, but the galaxy was far from peaceful. The Xolthar had been just one enemy among many. The Terran fleet had proven its strength, but that would not be enough to protect humanity forever. There would always be new threats, new dangers. Valdez knew this. "We've done it, Commander," said Lieutenant Patel, breaking the silence. "The Veltray are safe. The Xolthar are defeated. But what now?" Valdez turned to her. She had been asking herself the same question. The victory had been hard-earned, and now it was time to move forward. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy that humanity was not a force to be underestimated. But it had come at a price. The fleet had suffered losses. Soldiers, friends, comrades, people who had fought side by side to protect the weak. Valdez thought of them often. Their sacrifice would never be forgotten. "We rebuild," Valdez said finally, her voice steady. "We rebuild and prepare for whatever comes next." The Ironclad began its journey back to Earth, carrying the survivors of the battle. The Deathworlders would return home, but they would never forget the fight they had just won. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been cemented, and the Veltray would forever be in their debt. But that wasn't the only thing that had changed. The entire galaxy now knew what humanity was capable of. The Deathworlders were not just a force of nature, they were a symbol of resilience and strength. Back on Earth, Valdez and her crew were hailed as heroes. The victory over the Xolthar was celebrated, and the world looked to the stars with renewed hope. But Valdez knew the truth. War had never been about glory. It was about survival. The galaxy was still filled with dangers, and the Deathworlders were ready for them. They had made their mark on the universe, but their work was not over. "We've proven ourselves," Valdez said to her crew as they gathered in the briefing room. "But there's more to be done. We have allies now, and we have enemies. The galaxy will change, but we will make sure that humanity remains a force that others respect." The room was quiet as Valdez's words sank in. The crew knew what she meant. There would always be battles to fight, but they were ready for whatever came next. As the Ironclad drifted back toward Earth, Valdez felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The war was over, but a new chapter was beginning. The Deathworlders had secured their place in the galaxy, and with it, humanity had forged its path forward, stronger, united, and ready to face any challenge. The future was uncertain, but Valdez was confident of one thing. Humanity had become a force that would not be easily defeated. The galaxy had been warned. The Deathworlders were here to stay.